Hello everybody and welcome back to another tutorial. This week we are going to be focusing on color mixing and we're going to work monochromatically, which means that we're only going to be using one color. For today I've selected the color red and we are going to be mixing it with black and white, and we'll talk about tints, tones, and shades. But before we get too far into it, I do want to say that this is part of our video tutorial series called Staying Creative at Home with Minimal Art Supplies. Now I understand that you might not have paint at home, but we wanted to do this tutorial in case you do want to start painting during the summer. You will have some basic strategies to help you get started. Painting is a lot of fun. It is one of my favorite things to do as an artist. It's probably my primary medium. Second, maybe to drawing, just sketching, but in terms of really dedicating a lot of time to a piece of art, is usually a painting. So hopefully you'll find today's tutorial very instructional or helpful. I do want to cover some of the materials that you will need. Since we are talking about paint, I will be painting on paper, and paper is totally fine. I am using a cardstock just because it's a little bit heavier and it won't buckle as much. So let's talk about the materials that you would need if you wanted to practice this at home. Like I said, you need a painting surface. I'm using cardstock, cardboard, anything really will do. I don't recommend though a really thin surface like thin paper because it buckles and it gets a little bit annoying if it starts to buckle a little too much. You will need a container of, for water. I am using water-based paint. In this case, I'm using acrylic paint. There is tempera paint that you can buy, which is also water soluble or water based, and it can be really great for learning how to mix paints. The type of colors you will get with that do tend to vary a little bit more. Acrylic tends to be more consistent. Once you really get into painting, you might develop your preference for a brand. I happen to like Liquitex quite a bit, but there's a variety of other brands out there. I am using the very basic, like student grade Liquitex for this demo, which is really good quality to begin with. Anyways, all right. So you will need a water container. You will need paint. I recommend that you start with one color. Like I said, I'm using red plus white plus black, and then you will need at least one brush. And I really recommend that you get a mixing knife or a palette knife. There's a variety of them. You can get plastic ones. I have metal ones just because I use them so much. They last longer. And it's important for mixing paint. You do want to get into the habit of mixing your paint using a palette knife, not your brush, because if you're using your brush to mix the paint, you are going to shorten the lifespan of that brush and it'll ruin a lot faster. And you definitely need a palette. A palette can be just about anything. It could be a plastic or a paper plate. I'm using this here. This is nothing fancy. This is basically a really large subway tile. I believe it is 8 by 20. It's literally a tile that you use for construction, like in a bathroom or in a hallway or something like that. I think it's a fantastic palette, and it's really inexpensive. I got it at a hardware store for under $5, and it lasts forever. The best kinds of palette tends to be a glass-like surface because you can scrape the paint off once it's dry, and you can keep reusing it. If you want to be a little bit more earth conscious, you don't want to keep throwing plastic plates away or paper plates, adding it to a landfill. So this is a good reusable alternative for a palette. Or if you have an old frame for pictures, and you're not using it, you can take the glass off of there, something small like a 9 by 10 or 9 by 11. That's big enough for small paintings, and then you can go from there. And again, keeping in mind this is for beginners. You will develop preferences as you go along if you do like painting, and you'll start to see what works for you and what doesn't. Or excuse me, we'll cover some basic painting techniques today, and hopefully you'll find them helpful. All right, so let's get into it. All right, so the first thing you want to do is kind of get situated. So I have all my materials here. I have my palette knife, my brush, and I have a paper towel because you will need to be washing and drying your brush. I have the paints that I will use. Like I said, we're using black and white, and then our main color. All right, and then we have our mixing surface or our palette and our palette knife. All right, so you kind of want to situate everything in a way where you kind of are able to flow. You don't want to be mixing paint here and then dragging it over your surface because you might drip, and then that kind of ruins what you're working on. So if you notice, I'm gonna be doing all my mixing. I'm gonna work right-handed on this demo, so I'm gonna be mixing everything to the right, and then I'm gonna bring it to the left, and then that way I'm minimizing an accident that will happen, or that might happen. All right, and then what I also am going to do is, since this is a demo for mixing colors, I am going to I'm gonna draw myself a little table here. Because I want to be able to show you how color can be mixed and modified. All right, so I'm just going to draw some sections. And I think that's good. So we have, this is going to be our main color, and our main color is going to be red. So this will be our base red, and then we're going to add white to this. So we're going to modify the color. All right, and then I'm actually going to divide this in two, because on one side I'm going to add white, and on the other side I'm going to add black. So over here I am going to say plus white, and here I'm going to say plus black. So you'll see how that color is modified by adding those two different colors. I will also talk about what a tint, a tone, and a shade is. All right, and we'll get into that. All right, so first of all, let's get our paints ready. So I'm going to start with that. I have a little sample of red that I'm going to use, and I'm going to just get that open like that. Put that to the side, and I'm going to squeeze a little bit here of our red. Oh, it's a beautiful red. Okay, and that's a lot of paint there. Believe it or not, that is more than enough for the majority of our tutorial. All right, great. So the first thing that I want to do is whenever you paint, one of the best things you can do is always rinse off your brush. And you might be thinking, oh, my brush is clean, I haven't used it. But brush and paint work better if there's a little bit of moisture in the bristles. So that's a very helpful tip. You want to get the excess water off. Like I said, all you need is a little bit of moisture. All right, and you do want to activate your paint. If you're working with moist paint, it's good, but I always like to kind of work it in a little bit with my palette knife instead of reaching in and trying to grab a big glove. You don't need a lot of paint out for this type of practice because paint spreads. All right, so here we have red. Okay, so this is our basic red. And as you can see, it's a nice deep color, okay, of red. I'm not too worried about staying perfectly within the lines. I think you'll get the point, and I can even give this a little bit more of a covering, give it another layer, so it's nice and red for all of us to see. All right, and I'm gonna go ahead and do the other side since we want to see that difference. Okay. All right, I'm gonna get a little bit more water here to make this flow a little easier. There we go. All right, so there we have our base color is gonna be red. All right, so now we're gonna talk about mixing. There's a very useful rule to follow in mixing. Just a word of advice: if you are mixing with acrylic, you do want to keep your brush clean, because acrylic paint, one of the benefits of it, but also one of the drawbacks of it, is that when it dries like a plastic, because it's kind of a plastic base. It has acrylic in it, or the medium is acrylic medium. and when it dries, it will feel like plastic if it's just a clump. So you do want to keep your brush clean because if it dries on your brush, it basically you just harden your brush and it becomes useless for this type of painting. It has other ways for like different textures if you want to paint that way, which is useful. But for this purpose, we're focusing on just mixing. All right, so I have my base color red, and I'm going to start with white. So I'm going to get a little bit of white out and just put it on my palette. Again, I don't have a lot out. I can always go back and get more, but I won't be able to put it back in. So I always err on the side of caution and not get too much paint out. All right, so the very important rule for mixing colors is you want to go dark into light. And let's be careful how we say that. So dark into light. So if we're looking at the difference between red and white in terms of hue, which is the color, we can say that white, is very light, and dark by comparison is dark. It doesn't mean that red is a dark color. We're just saying by comparison. So in order for me to modify this color, I want to go dark into light. And the way that works is that if I wanted to create a pink, I want to put white into the red. All right, so but if I put this much white into this red, it's not going to make it into a light pink. It'll turn it pink, but it might not be the pink that I want. So it's always easier to start with the lightest color. So I'm going to put the white here. All right, I'm going to clean my palette knife. And now I'm going to grab a little bit of red, and I'm going to put it into the white. So that's dark into light. Just make sure. Yes, I was just checking that I was in frame. All right, so I'm going to take a little bit of red, and I'm going to do this, just as an example. So if you look at this much red that I have on my palette, let me see if I can get it to focus on that. So as you can see, it's not much at all. There we go. You can see I have very little red for that much white. All right, but that is more than enough to modify this much white into a pink color. It will be a light pink, but right now I have full control and I'm not going to be wasting a lot of paint. So if I would have done this in the reverse fashion, I would have put that much white into this pink, and it would have, into this red, it would have turned it pink. But if I wanted to make it lighter, I would need to continue to add a bunch of white until I finally got to the pink that I need. But then I would have ended up with this big glob of pink that I might not need. So that becomes, then that's us being a little bit wasteful. And we don't want to do that because paint can be expensive, and if we are painting a lot, we want to have control over the amount of paint we are using. Okay, again, I'm going to add a little bit of moisture to my brush. I'm going to load my brush. This is called loading my brush when you put paint into the bristles, and I'm going to put my first color here. So now we have red plus white, and believe it or not, this is called a tint. And I know that sounds really counterintuitive to most people because we are so used to saying, our sunglasses have a tint to it, or our car windows get tinted. But in art, and especially color mixing, color theory, a tint is a color plus white. All right, a tone is a color plus gray, and a shade is a color plus black. And if you think about it, that makes a little bit more sense, because if you're looking for shade, you go where there's a darker area, right? Like the shade of a tree or the shade of a house, then as opposed to a tint. So I'm not exactly sure where a tint, the word tint got associated with things being darker. I'm sure there's a history there, but for our purposes in art and color mixing, tint is a color plus white. Like I said, tone is a color plus gray, and a shade is a color plus black. All right, so now I have my first pink here, and I'm going to increase the amount of red that I'm going to put into my mix here, and that will make it a little bit more pink. So not as light as it was before. So as you can see, I'm using my palette knife to mix this and mix it well. And I'm just going to pick up the color from here and apply it here. And as you can see, you can create some very beautiful transitions from within one color, excuse me. So I can go from a very light pink all the way back to our natural red or original red. The camera might not even be picking up the difference between there, but there is a definite difference between this being a very light pink and then this becoming a hotter pink. All right, let's keep on going. I might even make that a little bit darker later, but we'll see. All right, so I'm gonna make quite a big jump. If you notice, I'm grabbing about 3 times as much red. So the jump between here and there might be a little bit too much. So I might take a little bit off here. Again, remember, we are using the rule of dark into light here. Oh, so yeah, that's definitely a big jump. But notice that I haven't gone back to get more paint. I'm still using with the I'm still working with the original amount of paint that I got out, and that is because I have control. If I would have had that white go into the red, I would have had to get more paint, white paint from the tube already, and would be making a lot of paint that I am not going to use. So this method, the dark into light method for mixing, allows you to maintain quite a bit of control in the proportions that you are using for paint, or the amounts you're using for paint. All right, and you can start seeing that gradation happen. Okay, so I got 3 more steps to go there. I'm going to jump ahead here and add a little bit more of this. As you can see, this is getting to be a hotter pink. Again, this is using the rule of dark into light. It doesn't mean the red is a dark color. It simply means that in comparison to the white, the red is the darker color. And you will see how that is applied to when we start working red and black together. As you can anticipate, the roles change there, right? So between the red and black, the red becomes the lighter color. So right now we're adding red into the white. Momentarily, what will happen is we're gonna be adding the red into the black. All right, so I see I'm getting a little bit too much saturation here, so I'm gonna wipe out some of the extra. I'm gonna scoop up a little bit more red. Mix this well. Maybe a little bit more red here. All right, and here's our final pink. Got that here, and as you can see, we have 3. Excuse me, not 3. Let me finish this. We have a pretty nice selection and a nice range of different pinks. Of course, we can have many different steps in between all these, but you can see we went from this very faint pink, very light pink, all the way up to back to the red. And that is working monochromatically, meaning that mono is one chroma color, and then this becomes a one color plus white plus the other color, black, white, and gray system. All right, so there we go. This is using the rule of dark into light. So now I'm going to rinse off my brush. Make sure I drain it and dry it so it's ready for the next step. I'm gonna put it down, and then I'm also going to rinse off my palette knife, get the extra. I am using paper towels right now, but I recommend if you have an old rag at home that you don't mind getting paint all over, go ahead and use that. Again, you can be a little bit more earth conscious and not add more waste to the environment. We all have an old t-shirt that we don't want anymore, so you can probably be able to do that. All right, so I have my red still. I'm going to use that. I'm going to get a little bit of black. I'm going to put it right here. And black is such a dominant color. It's such a powerful color. It's so much fun to work with because it's so strong. But you do have to be careful that you don't overdo it. Otherwise, you'll end up with a darker color than you possibly want. All right, so we're gonna use the same rule of dark into light, but now we have that role reversal, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move this. I'm gonna move my water off to the side so I can mix right here. Don't pay attention to that. That's just some old paint there. We can scrape it off. Again, see, that's the advantage of having a glass or a tile palette. You can scrape all stuff off and be totally fine. So this is going to be my color, and we're gonna do the dark into light. So remember, before I started with the clump of white and started bringing the red, because between red and black, black becomes the darkest color. I'm going to start with adding the black into the red. So for this one, I'm going to start from the top. So I'm going to add a little bit of black into this red, mix it well, and as you can see, the power of that black color is just pressing right away. And I love this. I love deep red, so this is one of my favorite mixings to do. We kind of have like an unofficial kind of burgundy color for Latino arts that I enjoy, and we use it quite a lot in our branding. So it's part of our branding, so that I guess that's official. But and so for some other purposes, it's really neat. I like the way it looks. So as you can see, we have the first color of the red plus black here, and I love color mixing because, as you can see here, we have that plain red, which is pretty, but as soon as you start adding other colors into it, it just becomes so much more interesting. The color has much more depth and personality. So you all saw how much or how little black I added to that red, and it already transformed it. I'm gonna do one more here so you can see that. I'm gonna grab a little bit more. That's quite a bit actually. I'm gonna take some off, and I'm going to mix that in, and that'll give us a nice darker red. We start getting that maroon color or that deep wine color, which is so pretty. All right, after I do this square, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to use a little time lapse. I will finish this row because there's some other elements that I want to talk to you about, and I do want to keep this tutorial a little bit shorter, just so you're able to take the information and apply it and not have to watch this very long tutorial. All right, so as you can see, our red is changing, and I'm going to continue with the last 4 squares, making them darker by adding black to the red. And remember, when you add white, that's called a tint. When you add gray, that's called a tone. And this row is red, a color, plus black, which is called a shade. All right, so we're going to switch over to a little time lapse, and you'll see this part go by fast. All right, friends, as you can see here, I've done a little bit more work. I finished our shade column here, which was our color plus black, and I've added about the same amount of black in increments, and you can see this beautiful deep red. On the camera, I understand that it might show up as black, but there is quite a big difference between what this beautiful color is, which is a very deep red, versus just flat black, and I'll demonstrate that here. You can see there. So hopefully you're able to see that difference. And that's straight black, and this is that very deep red with quite a bit of black in it. All right, and then here, well, what I have is this is a tone. So here's a tint, which is the red plus white, or a color plus white, and then we have the shade, which is a color plus black. But tones are a color plus gray, and I have two different tones here. This was a very light gray that I mixed over here and then added red to it. And then over here, this is a tone with a fairly, like a medium range gray that was about the same intensity as the red. Mixed it, and you can see that we have that nice deep color. What I love about color mixing, especially using just white, black, and gray, is that you get this amazing range of colors. And like I said before, all the different transitions between here and there, and in any one of these configurations could be a lot greater. So you can have a very smooth transition that can occur if you spend the time mixing colors, and you become really good at that through practice. But the wide range of different types of red that you can achieve really opens up the possibilities to what you can paint. Remember that this system is called monochromatic. We are working with one single color plus black plus white, and then once you have the black and the white, you can also make gray, which adds another layer there for color mixing. All right, and then here I did a quick painting of an apple, and I'm gonna duplicate that here. So I'm gonna do another quick little sketch of an apple. All right, that. My little stem here, and of course we have a little leaf. And what I did was very simple. All I did was grab my red, kind of filled it in. It's getting a little bit of watery there, which is fine. And I added some light and some dark into it. All right, as you can see, we have our red apple, but then I can start adding some highlights with a pink, and then I also can add some shadows with my dark red here. Okay, I'm gonna get a little bit more red out here. Again, this is working monochromatically. Mono means one, chroma refers to the color, and it becomes its own system for practicing how to mix paint. All right, I highly recommend that you practice this. Painting is so much fun. It does require quite a bit of practice though, so I want to kind of encourage you to take your time and practice. Try not to get frustrated. The best way to practice painting and mixing colors is using this monochromatic system. I picked red today for the demo, but what you can do is work with the primary colors. So make yourself a little sheet like this where you are working with one color. So in this one, I'm working with red, but you can come up with another one for yellow, and you could paint a banana on that one, and then another one for blue, and you can paint some berries or an object that's blue in your house if you don't want to work with fruit. But this is a really wonderful way for you to practice painting and color mixing. But you can see the amazing range of colors that you can have just using a single color plus black plus white, and then also mixing with gray. All right, I really hope you found this tutorial enjoyable and useful. And I want to encourage you to pick up some painting this summer. There are some very affordable starter sets for painting out there. There are stores or online. You don't need anything fancy. A basic color set will do. It's gonna be a lot of fun, and it's something that you might enjoy. All right. I also want to encourage all of you to stay connected with us at Latino Arts through social media. We are on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Latino Arts Inc. is our handle at Latino Arts Inc. And you can also check our website for more programming information at latinoartsinc.org. So that's latinoartsinc.org. Well, friends, I'm looking forward to seeing what you create. Please share with us on social media. And let us know if you have any other questions regarding mixing paint or something that you might have thought of in this tutorial. Thank you very much, and we look forward to staying connected with you.